Imagine, if you will, a city beyond imagination. Gleaming towers that touch the skies, wide canals glistening like veins of silver, and streets filled with wealth, wisdom, and wonders that our modern minds can barely comprehend. A civilization so powerful, so advanced, it was said to rival even the gods. And yet, in a single night and day of misfortune, it vanished beneath the waves, swallowed by the ocean, never to be seen again. This is the legend of Atlantis, first whispered more than 2,000 years ago by the Greek philosopher Plato. The story of Atlantis has haunted humanity ever since. Was it a parable, a warning against pride and corruption, or was it real? A lost civilization that once thrived and then disappeared, leaving behind nothing but echoes in myth and mystery. Tonight, we dive deep into the enigma of Atlantis. We'll explore ancient texts, modern theories, wild speculations, and the tantalizing question that has refused to die. Did Atlantis really exist? Our journey begins in Athens, around 360 BCE. Plato, one of the greatest philosophers of all time, was composing two works, Timaeus and Critias. In these dialogues, Plato describes a mighty and prosperous island empire known as Atlantis. He places it beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, in the vast Atlantic Ocean. According to him, Atlantis was larger than Libya and Asia combined, a land blessed with fertile plains, rich mountains, and abundant resources. But it was not just wealth that set Atlantis apart. Plato wrote that the Atlanteans had advanced technology, grand architecture, and powerful navies. Their capital city, he described, was a marvel of design, concentric rings of land and water connected by bridges and canals, with a gleaming acropolis rising in the center. And who ruled this majestic city? Plato tells us it was founded by none other than Poseidon, the god of the sea. The god had fallen in love with a mortal woman, Clito, and from their union came 10 sons. These sons became the kings of Atlantis, with the eldest, Atlas, giving his name to both the city and the surrounding ocean. For generations, Atlantis flourished. Its influence stretched across the seas, conquering lands as far as Egypt and Italy. Yet, as with so many empires, prosperity led to arrogance. The Atlanteans grew corrupt, greedy, and power-hungry. No longer satisfied with their blessings, they sought to dominate the known world, and this was their downfall. Plato recounts that the gods, angered by Atlantis's hubris, unleashed destruction. In a single day and night of catastrophe, earthquakes, floods, and fire, the mighty empire was swallowed by the ocean, its splendor lost forever, leaving behind only silence. Now here's where the mystery deepens. Plato insists that this story was not invention, but history. He claimed it was passed down through Egyptian priests, told to Solon, an Athenian lawmaker, and eventually to him. Yet no other ancient writer before Plato mentions Atlantis. Was it a moral allegory? A philosophical tale about the dangers of human pride? Or was it the echo of a memory, a story rooted in real events long forgotten? And so, with Plato's words, the legend was born, one that would echo through millennia, sparking quests, obsessions, and countless theories. After Plato's account, the story of Atlantis lingered like a ghost, fascinating, frustrating, and elusive. For centuries, philosophers, scholars, explorers, and dreamers wrestled with the same burning question. Was Plato telling a fable or describing a real place that once existed? The earliest readers of Plato were skeptical. Aristotle, Plato's most famous student, dismissed Atlantis outright. He supposedly said, "Plato invented it, and that is the end of it." For Aristotle, Atlantis was simply a morality tale, a lesson about the dangers of pride and unchecked ambition, but not everyone was so quick to reject it. Some believed there was a grain of truth beneath the myth, that perhaps Plato had exaggerated, but his words were rooted in distant memories of a real disaster. As time went on, the story of Atlantis slipped in and out of European thought. Medieval scholars often dismissed it as pagan nonsense, but by the Renaissance, curiosity bloomed once again. Explorers set sail into the Atlantic, convinced they might find Plato's lost island waiting beyond the horizon. When Christopher Columbus crossed the ocean in 1492, whispers of Atlantis resurfaced. Could the New World itself be Atlantis? Was this vast, unknown land the remnant of a forgotten empire? Spanish chroniclers like Francisco López de Gómara suggested that the Americas might indeed be what Plato described, a land rich in resources, filled with strange peoples and wonders. The age of exploration became the age of obsession. Adventurers mapped the coasts of Africa, the Caribbean, and the Americas, searching for signs of the fabled kingdom. Stories of golden cities, strange ruins, and powerful civilizations, like the Maya and the Aztec, fueled the imagination. To European minds, these cultures seemed to echo Plato's descriptions, advanced societies that rose and fell mysteriously. But where was the proof? In the 17th century, the scholar Athanasius Kircher published one of the earliest maps of Atlantis. He placed it right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, between Europe and the Americas, drawing an island with canals and mountains, eerily similar to Plato's account. Yet over time, this dream of finding Atlantis began to unravel. No explorers ever returned with evidence of a sunken city. No ruins emerged from the depths of the Atlantic, and skeptics pointed out a troubling detail. Plato said Atlantis vanished around 9,000 years before Solon. That would place its destruction around 9,600 BCE, long before the rise of known civilizations. Was Plato describing a real memory, or imagining a past that never was? Still, the allure would not die. Each century added new theories, new claimants, new discoveries. Atlantis became a mirror of human longing, a symbol of the ultimate lost paradise. For more than 2,000 years, Atlantis has sparked one of the greatest intellectual treasure hunts in human history. Scholars, scientists, and storytellers have all tried to solve the riddle. Where was Atlantis? What was it? And why has the world never stopped searching? Let's explore the leading theories, from the scientific to the supernatural, from the credible to the wildly speculative. The Mediterranean theory. Was Atlantis really Santorini? One of the most popular explanations points not to the Atlantic Ocean, but to the Mediterranean Sea. Many researchers argue that Plato's tale was inspired by the volcanic eruption of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1600 BCE. The eruption, Thera, was one of the most catastrophic natural disasters in history. A massive volcano tore the island apart, sending tsunamis across the Aegean and devastating the powerful Minoan civilization of Crete. The Minoans were a seafaring people known for their palaces, art, and advanced culture. To some historians, they fit Plato's description of a wealthy maritime power, and their sudden decline could mirror Atlantis's destruction. But here's the problem. The timeline doesn't match Plato's claim of 9,000 years before Solon. To make the theory work, scholars suggest Plato either exaggerated or mistranslated the numbers. Was 9,000 years really just 900, or did he deliberately stretch the truth to serve his philosophical purpose? 2. The catastrophe theory, memories of a lost world. Another theory suggests that Atlantis was not a single place, but a memory of ancient cataclysms passed down through generations. Imagine prehistoric peoples witnessing massive floods as glaciers melted at the end of the Ice Age. Around 10,000 BCE, entire coastlines drowned, fertile plains vanished, and human settlements were swallowed by rising seas. Could these memories have evolved into the legend of a sunken empire? Supporters of this theory point to the global myths of floods. The Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia Noah's Ark in the Bible, flood legends in India, China, and the Americas. Across cultures, we hear echoes of a great deluge. Perhaps Atlantis was just one version of this shared human trauma. The lost civilization theory, a forgotten advanced culture. Some thinkers, like Ignatius Donnelly in the 19th century, argued that Atlantis was a real advanced civilization, the mother of all later cultures. Donnelly believed Atlantis was the origin of Egyptian pyramids, Mayan temples, and even ancient technologies. According to this theory, when Atlantis was destroyed, its survivors spread across the world, seeding knowledge that gave rise to later civilizations. It's a bold, romantic idea, and one that fueled much of modern pop culture's image of Atlantis. But critics argue there's no archaeological evidence to support it. Civilization as we know it began around 5,000 years ago, not 12,000. If Atlantis was real, where are the ruins? The fringe theories. Aliens, crystals, and lost powers. Of course, not all theories are so grounded. Atlantis has become fertile, soil for the strange and the fantastic. Some claim the Atlanteans possessed powerful crystals that generated limitless energy, a technology far beyond our own. Others argue they had flying machines, weapons of mass destruction, or knowledge of interdimensional travel. And then, there are those who say the Atlanteans were not entirely human at all. Ancient astronaut theorists suggest Atlantis was founded or aided by extraterrestrials, who either destroyed the city or left when humanity wasn't ready. These ideas may sound outrageous, but they capture the imagination. After all, Plato's description of Atlantis does read like science fiction, a utopian empire with technology that even today seems incredible. The Atlantic Ocean theories, right where Plato said it was. Finally, some insist we should take Plato literally. Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, but where exactly? The Azores, a chain of islands in the mid-Atlantic, are a favorite candidate. Rising steeply from the ocean floor, some believe they are the peaks of a sunken continent. Others point to the Caribbean, to Cuba, or even to the fabled Bermuda Triangle as the resting place of Atlantis. Sonar scans, underwater pyramids, and mysterious stone formations have all been presented as proof. Yet so far none have been universally accepted, and so the search continues. Each theory reflects not only a possible truth, but also a mirror of the human imagination. Atlantis has become more than a lost city. It is a canvas upon which every age paints its fears, its hopes, and its deepest desires. Atlantis in modern times, obsession, pop culture, and pseudoscience. If Plato could have glimpsed the future, he might have been astonished at what his words unleashed. A few passages in two dialogues became the seed of centuries of obsession. Atlantis was no longer just an idea in philosophy. It became a cultural phenomenon, reshaped again and again by each era that inherited the legend. The rise of modern Atlantis. Obsession, the modern fascination with Atlantis, truly ignited in the late 19th century, thanks to one man, Ignatius Donnelly. In 1882, Donnelly published a book called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. It was a sensation. In it, he argued that Plato's story was not fiction, but fact. Atlantis, he claimed, was the mother civilization of the world. Every major ancient culture, Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Americas, owed their knowledge to survivors of Atlantis. Donnelly painted a vision of a golden age of science, architecture, and philosophy that ended in disaster. His book inspired thousands, and for many, it was the first time Atlantis felt not like a myth, but a possibility. From there, the floodgates opened. Atlantis seeped into spiritualism, theosophy, and the emerging fascination with lost civilizations. Writers like Helena Blavatsky claimed Atlanteans were spiritually advanced beings, wielding psychic powers and wisdom we can barely imagine. Some even claimed they communicated with the stars. It was no longer just history. Atlantis became mysticism, a symbol of hidden truth, Atlantis in pop culture. By the 20th century, Atlantis had fully entered the world's imagination. Novels, comic books, films, and television shows reinvented the city again and again. In Pulp Fiction, Atlantis was a land of adventure and danger, filled with strange creatures and forgotten technologies. In the comic book world, it became the kingdom of Aquaman and Namor the Submariner, underwater superheroes who carried the torch of a lost empire. Movies like Disney's Atlantis, The Lost Empire, 2001, brought the myth to younger generations, turning it into a dazzling animated vision of steampunk exploration. And let's not forget conspiracy theories. Atlantis became a favorite topic of pseudoscience television, from ancient aliens to countless documentaries promising to reveal the truth, always just out of reach. Each retelling reshaped Atlantis to fit the audience. Sometimes it was utopian, sometimes dystopian, sometimes a warning, sometimes a promise. Atlantis became a mirror of our hopes and fears, a story we can never seem to let go of. Atlantis and the occult, but it wasn't just pop culture. Atlantis became central to occult and New Age beliefs. Some claimed the Atlanteans had developed psychic powers, telepathy, levitation, energy manipulation. Edgar Cayce, the famous sleeping prophet of the early 20th century, said Atlantis was real and predicted it would rise again. He even claimed that ruins would be discovered near the Bahamas in the late 20th century. Although those ruins never appeared, Cayce's words fueled decades of fascination. To his followers, Atlantis wasn't just history, it was destiny. A reminder that humanity once had greatness and might one day regain it. Science versus pseudoscience. Of course, mainstream science has remained skeptical. Archaeologists demand evidence, not stories. Geologists argue that no continent could have disappeared so suddenly in recorded history. Yet every few years a new discovery makes headlines. Sonar images that look like grids on the ocean floor, strange pyramidal structures spotted in the Caribbean, underwater ruins off the coast of Japan. Almost always these turn out to be natural formations, wishful thinking, or misinterpretations. But the hunger for Atlantis ensures that people keep looking. And maybe that's the real secret. Atlantis is not just a place, it's an idea. A mystery so perfect that even when disproved, it survives. Atlantis in modern times has become more than a lost city. It is a stage upon which we project our deepest questions. Where did we come from? What have we lost? And could it ever return? The psychological and symbolic meaning of Atlantis. Why does the legend of Atlantis endure? Why, after more than 2,000 years, do we still chase this story, searching the seas, writing books, making films, weaving endless theories? Perhaps the answer lies not beneath the ocean, but within the human mind. Atlantis is more than a lost city. It is a symbol, one that speaks to our deepest hopes, fears, and desires. A warning against hubris. First, Atlantis represents a timeless warning. Plato himself presented it this way. Atlantis was powerful, wealthy, advanced, but it grew arrogant. It reached too far, tried to dominate too much, and was struck down. This theme echoes across history. From Rome to Babylon, from colonial empires to modern superpowers, the cycle of rise and fall repeats. Atlantis reminds us that no civilization, however mighty, is immune to collapse. It is a story of hubris punished, of pride before the fall, and perhaps that's why it feels so relevant in every age. Each generation sees its own reflection in Atlantis. The longing for a lost golden age Atlantis also embodies something softer, more nostalgic, the longing for a golden age. Across cultures, humans dream of a paradise lost. The Garden of Eden, Shangri-La, El Dorado. Atlantis fits perfectly into this pattern, a memory of a time when humanity was wiser, purer, more advanced. To believe in Atlantis is to believe we once had greatness, and perhaps we could find it again. It is hope disguised as history. the fear of catastrophe. But Atlantis also speaks to fear, the fear that everything we build could vanish in an instant. Earthquakes, floods, volcanoes, rising seas. The planet is fragile, and so are we. Atlantis dramatizes this terror. One night a mighty empire stands. The next it is gone, erased as though it never existed. In our age of climate change and environmental crisis, this symbolism feels sharper than ever. Could we too be an Atlantis in the making? The subconscious pull psychologists suggest Atlantis resonates because it mirrors our subconscious. Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst, spoke of archetypes, deep, universal symbols that appear in myths across cultures. Atlantis is one such archetype. The drowned world, the sunken memory, the dream of something both lost and eternal. It calls to us not just as history, but as myth. And myths, unlike facts, never die. The eternal mirror. And so, Atlantis endures. For some it is a literal quest, for others a metaphor, for still others a mystery that does not need solving, because its power lies in the questions it raises. When we speak of Atlantis, we are not only speaking of a city that may or may not have existed. We are speaking of ourselves, our ambitions, our greed, our dreams, our fears. Atlantis is not just a place beneath the waves. It is a mirror held up to humanity, showing us what we might become and what we might lose. The scientific expeditions and modern research attempts if Atlantis is nothing more than a myth, then why do scientists and explorers keep looking for it? Why do expeditions still set sail, armed with sonar, satellites, and submarines, determined to peer into the abyss for a glimpse of something that may not exist? Because Atlantis is not only a story, it is a challenge, a riddle daring us to solve it. And modern science, despite its skepticism, has not resisted the temptation. Sonar and the ocean floor in the 20th century, as sonar technology advanced, researchers began to map the ocean floor. The vast plains, ridges, and trenches of the Atlantic Ocean were revealed for the first time. Some believed these maps would finally show Atlantis. In 2009, Google Earth images of the ocean floor off the Canary Islands appeared to show a grid-like pattern, resembling the streets of a sunken city. Headlines screamed, "Atlantis found," but scientists quickly explained it away. The city was nothing more than the digital imprint of sonar mapping equipment. No ruins, no walls, no temples, just technology's ghostly fingerprints. Still, the dream was too strong to die. The Azores hypothesis. The Azores, a group of volcanic islands in the mid-Atlantic, remain one of the most popular candidates for Atlantis. Rising abruptly from deep waters, they looked like the tips of a sunken plateau. In the 1970s, divers near the Azores reported strange stone formations on the seabed, structures that looked suspiciously artificial. Were they remnants of an ancient city? Skeptics argued they were natural basalt formations, yet the images of underwater walls and roads still circulate in books and documentaries, fueling speculation. The Bimini Road, perhaps the most famous evidence for Atlantis, lies not in the mid-Atlantic, but in the Caribbean. Off the coast of Bimini in the Bahamas, divers in 1968 discovered a series of large flat stones arranged in a line beneath the shallow waters. The formation became known as the Bimini Road. To believers, it was a roadway or seawall built by Atlanteans, a tantalizing remnant of a sunken empire. But geologists point out the stones are simply beach rock, fractured and aligned by natural processes. Nature, it seems, can sometimes mimic the hand of man. Yet the Bimini Road holds a curious footnote. Edgar Cayce, the American mystic, had predicted that evidence of Atlantis would be found in the Bahamas around 1968. When divers stumbled upon the site in the exact year he mentioned, believers saw prophecy fulfilled. Coincidence or something more? Satellite scans and deep-sea mysteries. With satellites peering into the oceans and submarines descending into the deep, new discoveries arrive every decade. Strange pyramidal structures off Cuba, grids on the seafloor near Spain, stone circles, near Japan's Yonaguni Island. Most of these have natural explanations, yet the allure remains. Each anomaly is another spark in the fire of mystery. And perhaps that's the essence of Atlantis, the way it thrives in the gap between science and imagination. The relentless quest modern researchers often admit, we may never find Atlantis. If it was real, the ocean has swallowed it too deeply, too thoroughly to reveal its bones. And yet the search continues. Expeditions are funded, documentaries are filmed, divers plunge into the dark, endless blue, chasing shadows of a city that may never have been, because even in failure, the search for Atlantis gives us something: wonder. Atlantis in myth, literature, and pop culture legacy. Even if Atlantis never truly existed, its shadow stretches across centuries, weaving itself into myth, legend, literature, and even the entertainment we consume today. Atlantis, whether real or imagined, has become something greater than a lost city. It has become a cultural symbol, a mirror reflecting humanity's fears, ambitions, and longing for mystery. Atlantis in ancient myths and legends. After Plato, the story of Atlantis, it didn't fade, it transformed. Ancient writers and philosophers debated it, sometimes treating it as allegory, other times as lost history. In medieval Europe, the myth of a sunken land resonated with biblical tales of floods, punishment, and divine retribution. Sailors whispered about vanished lands beyond the horizon, sometimes blending the myth of Atlantis with tales of far away islands, golden cities, and Eden-like realms lost to the sea. And as the age of exploration dawned, Atlantis returned with renewed vigor. Every time a new land was discovered, some asked, could this be Atlantis? The birth of Atlantis in literature, the Renaissance and Enlightenment, transformed Atlantis from legend into a canvas for imagination. Writers like Francis Bacon in New Atlantis reimagined the city as a utopia, a place of science, wisdom, and human perfection. In the 19th century, Atlantis became a fascination for novelists. Jules Verne, the prophet of science fiction, hinted at lost civilizations in the deep. Ignatius Donnelly, in his 1882 book Atlantis, The Antediluvian World, claimed Atlantis was the cradle of all ancient civilizations from Egypt to the Mayans. His work, though criticized by academics, captured the public's imagination and laid the foundation for modern Atlantology. The belief that Atlantis was real and influenced human history. Atlantis in movies and television. As cinema rose, Atlantis leapt from the page to the screen. From black and white adventure films of the early 20th century to Disney's animated classic Atlantis. The Lost Empire, 2001. The city was no longer just an idea. It was a living, breathing world audiences could see. Movies painted Atlantis as everything from a paradise of crystal towers to a dystopia drowned by its own hubris. Sometimes it was advanced, futuristic, brimming with technology far beyond ours. Other times it was mystical, shimmering with magic and forgotten gods. On television, Atlantis became the backdrop for countless stories, from Stargate Atlantis, where it was reimagined as an alien-built city ship, to documentaries that blurred the line between fact and fantasy. Atlantis in video games and pop culture. In video games, Atlantis has become an eternal playground. Players dive into underwater ruins, battle ancient guardians, and uncover technologies long thought lost. Games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Tomb Raider reinvented Atlantis as a place of secrets waiting to be unlocked by the daring. Even comic books and superheroes were not immune. In DC Comics, Atlantis is the kingdom of Aquaman, a thriving underwater civilization. Marvel too offered its own interpretation through Namor, the Submariner. Atlantis has become so deeply embedded in pop culture that its name alone evokes visions of sunken temples, glowing orbs, and forgotten powers. Atlantis in music and art, from orchestral compositions to modern songs. Atlantis has inspired artists to capture the sensation of a world beneath the waves. Painters have depicted its marble columns sinking into blue-green oceans. Poets have written of drowned dreams and unreachable paradises. The myth is not static, it breathes, it adapts. It transforms with each generation, always reflecting humanity's desires. The eternal legacy. Why does Atlantis endure, even when reason tells us it may never have existed? Because Atlantis is not just a place, it is an idea, a symbol of what we long for and what we fear. It represents our hunger for knowledge, our suspicion of forgotten wisdom, and our recognition of humanity's fragile place against nature's fury. Whether it lies beneath the Atlantic waves or only in the depths of our imagination, Atlantis remains alive. Not in stone, not in ruins, but in us, in our myths, our stories, our dreams. And perhaps that is its greatest truth. Atlantis cannot be destroyed, because Atlantis was never meant to be found. It was meant to be remembered. And so we arrive at the end of our journey, not to the gates of Atlantis itself, but to something perhaps even more powerful, the realization that Atlantis is eternal, not as ruins of stone, but as a story that refuses to die. For over 2,000 years, scholars, adventurers, dreamers, and skeptics have chased it. Some sought glory, others sought truth. Many simply longed for wonder, yet none have returned with proof. What they brought back instead was something far greater. Questions. Questions that continue to echo through time like waves breaking on the shore. Was Atlantis a real place swallowed by the sea? Was it a warning crafted by Plato to remind us of pride and punishment? Or was it something else entirely? A mirror of human imagination, showing us what we desire and what we fear all at once. Perhaps that is the true power of Atlantis. Not in the possibility of discovery, but in its refusal to be solved. Its mystery keeps us searching, keeps us asking, keeps us wondering if somewhere out there beneath the waves or hidden in the folds of memory lies a forgotten world waiting to be reclaimed. And maybe in the end, the city of Atlantis is not beneath the ocean at all. Maybe it has always been here in the human spirit. In our relentless drive to explore, to uncover, to dream of worlds beyond reach. So the next time you hear the waves crash or gaze across the endless horizon, remember, somewhere in those depths lies not an answer, but a story. A story older than history, deeper than the sea, and destined to outlive us all. Because Atlantis is not lost. It is alive. In legend, in imagination, and in every whisper that dares to say, what if?